Alright, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to work on a Ford Territory, and the bit we're working on today is the brake caliper. If you're an owner of a Ford Territory, that's around 0508, you probably got a big problem with your brake calipers locking up. And after all the rain that we had from March through till about August, September, all that constant rain has resulted in the pistons in these calipers rusting out. So today we've got a whole kit here. We've got the K2471S caliper kit. That's all the rubber components that we're going to change on this caliper. This kit can be used on AU2, AU3, BA, Falcons as well. It's all the same gear. And we've got pistons here labelled for a BA Falcon, so yeah, everything's all the same. Territory come Falcon, it's exactly the same caliper. So we're going to get this wheel off. I got a few nuts to undo, and yeah, this piston. So we got new pistons to go in. I don't want to frig around fixing the old pistons. You can sand the old pistons back. What happens is they get a layer of rust on the area where the rubber boot goes over this bit here, and that rubber boot eventually fails, water starts seeping in, and then the steel piston just starts to rust on the lip part of it here. You will also get rust on the back of the piston, as the because the piston's sitting in brake fluid, you know, it's surrounded by brake fluid. Brake fluid's supposed to have no water in it at all, but it does absorb water over time, and if you don't do frequent enough brake fluid changes, enough rust develops on the back of the piston as well, just simply because the brake fluid has got a high level of water that's been absorbed into it. So alright, we'll get into it. I won't bore you with me pulling a wheel off. You guys know how to pull wheels off, and we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so we got our wheel off. We got our car jacked up, and we got the wheel stuck under the body just in case the jack slips. And here is our slightly corroded PBR caliper. So we're going to start by pulling off this bolt here, and the one down here as well. They look like they're a 12 or a 13. So we'll undo those, and yeah, the caliper will just come straight off, I reckon. We should probably take the brake line off first, because we're going to pull this whole caliper out. No, what we'll do is we'll take the caliper off. We'll use the hydraulic pressure of the brake pedal and the fluid to push the pistons out. You can undo this hose, put your air compressor on the end of it, and get the pistons out that way, but that's a little bit on the dangerous side. I don't really like doing it, because 1 psi of pressure on here is enough for the pistons just to go BAM! And you can possibly break a finger if they're in the wrong position. So we'll get the pistons out by using the hydraulic pressure. Alright, so let's get our spanners on that. Yeah, so we got 12 mil on that bolt there. Let's get our club hammer and loosen her up. That's how easy it is. Same on the bottom one. One of these days I'll buy a tripod. I don't need to whack it, I can just pull it with my hand. Finish undoing those. Alright, so we've got our bolts undone. It's just simply a case of just grabbing the caliper and easing it off. And what you want to avoid is stretching or bending on the brake line, the hydraulic brake line there, because you can crack the hose internally, and then that creates a problem where you can have calipers come on when they get hot and they won't come off, simply because the inner hose, so your brake lines are made up of two hoses. You've got an inner hose surrounded by an outer rubber hose. What can happen is if you stretch or crack that inner rubber hose, it can create what's very similar to like in like wind instruments. You can get like, it's like a reed valve. It allows the brake fluid to go one way, but it won't come back. So you can push the fluid out, push the caliper on and out, but it won't go back in. So if we just have a look at this here, we can see the rubbers on this caliper are absolutely shot. So it looks like this rubber here has actually got a hole in it. There's a big fat hole in there. It's no wonder these calipers are getting stuck. So once you tear this rubber, oh, look at that. That's how shocking it is. Look at that. Holy hell. Once you tear this boot, water just gets in and it corrodes the whole inside. So we need to get these pistons out. One method is you can put, if you've pulled the line off, you put compressed air in there, but you've got to be really careful because those pistons can come out like a bloody missile. So we'll just put that up there for the moment. I'll go inside and push on the brake pedal, and then we should see these pistons starting to come out. Alright, so we're just going to pump on the brake pedal. Should get all you foot fetish guys going. As we just push on it, we should see the pistons coming out. We probably want to get a bit of wood in there on that one piston that's coming out without the other one, so we can get them a bit even. There we go. I've just stuck the club hammer in there, so that'll then stop this piston coming out and allow this one to start coming out. Alright, so we can pretty much tell the piston that's frozen is the one that's stuck in. So I'm really giving this pedal what for. So I think I'm going to have to use a bit of compressed air on that one. So I've just started the car up. We're going to use the vacuum of the motor. With the car started, see that piston's now moving. That'll just make it a lot easier for us to work on. And there we go, big dump and load. Happy days. I gotta say, looking at this brake fluid with this piston out, this brake fluid is shocking. it's definitely past due for replacement. So if we have a look at this piston, so yeah, there's quite a bit of corrosion on there. And we can see up here on the lip up here, this is where water's been getting in. So you can just sand these with a bit of 800 and 1200 grit, because what happens is with this sitting in the brake fluid and the brake fluid's absorbing water, rust is developing around the piston and it's making the piston no longer round. You'll have high spots and low spots on the piston, and that stops the piston from freely traveling in the bore. And yeah, I've done many a piston where we've just simply sanded it back, given the bore a light sanding as well with some like 1000 grit or 1200 grit. And then I like to use a special type of grease that us photocopier printer technicians use. It's a heavily fluorinated grease, and you push it into the metal and it just stops, because there's so much fluorine in the grease, it stops the piston from rusting, and it just makes the caliper's service life go an extremely long time, as opposed to when you say buy the car brand new and you know, you've got to overhaul your calipers every 100,000 kilometers. Once I go over a piston with this photocopier printer grease and we put a smear around the inner boot, it just stops water from getting in. And the calipers last years, like 10 years plus with this grease. So yeah, and then if we just pull this boot out, it simply pulls off like so. That's the old one, that's crapped itself. And then in here you've got the rubber O-ring which seals against the surface of the piston. Look at the rust on that, that's shocking. So yeah, I think we'll just get this and we'll give the bore a bit of a light sanding, and we'll get in there with some fluorine grease and put it all back together, and happy days. It's such a simple device to rebuild and repair. I was always scared when I was a 19-year-old, now I'm in my 50s, it's like, what are you worried about? It's easy as. Anyway, let's get on to so we'll pull the main line off now, get that caliper out and start working on it. Alright, so we've just loosened the brake line bolt. Just got to bear in mind this bolt has a copper washer on the top of it here that obviously stops the bolt from losing leaking brake fluid, and there's also one on the other side as well, which I think we just dropped on the ground. Yep, there we go. So 2 copper washers, one on the outside, one on the inside, and we just got to try and keep this as clean as we can and get no dirt or any impurities in this. So we'll just carefully push this to the side. So now our caliper is free. I can watch all the old fluid come pouring out. So we'll just start disassembling this and get into rebuilding it, I guess. Alright, so it's important the area that you work on this caliper is a nice clean area. I'm just going to pull everything out of this thing. Yeah, it's quite heavily rusted up, so that's done for. Get that off. And we need to get those O-rings out that are in there. You got to make sure you just get in there and carefully pry them out and don't scratch the bore. Whatever you do, scratching the bore would be a very bad thing. Just get my finger up under that. And that O-ring just simply lifts up and out. No, I need two hands. Alright, so we got everything out of that caliper. I'm just going to go and take it and wash it in the sink now. Get a bit of degreaser on it. Just clean the whole thing up and try and get it back to aluminium. And then we'll inspect the bore and see what sort of condition it's in. Both bores, I should say. Alright, so I've just been washing this caliper down and cleaning it up. I can just see in the bore on both holes there is a bit of wear where the old piston's been rubbing. This one. It's a bit hard to see with the camera, but there is a bit of wear there. So I'm just going to go over that lightly with a bit of 2000 grit that I've got here. And yeah, we'll just because the idea is that the pistons can also make the bore go out of round, and then the edge of the piston as it's going back, it digs in. So we just want to just lightly bevel that out a bit, and then we'll reassemble it. We'll get all the water out of this first, so we'll heat the caliper up on the kitchen stove, I think, just to burn off any of the moisture, because the last thing you want to do is get any moisture in the system, as that would be bad. Alright, so we've got our caliper all cleaned up, and we've just gone in the bore with some 2000 grit just to smooth off any sort of beveled edges, just so that you feel the bore is all nice and smooth all the way around. We're just going to heat it up a little bit on the stove. We're not going to heat it up too much, just a little bit, because we need to get all the water that we washed the caliper out with off. So I'll just heat it up ever so slightly. That's probably enough. And then we'll just let it evaporate all the water off, and once we know the water's all off, then we'll move on to putting the new O-ring. We'll put in some of that photocopier grease and reassemble it and bleed the system, and that'll be it. Alright, so we just got the it all dried out. Just got to make sure each of the machined out areas for the O-ring and the outer dust water protector cover, make sure these are all nice and clean and that there's no junk stuck up in there or rust. And I'll give that a blowout, and we'll grab the pistons and just make sure that they fit. Alright, so this is the final stage. You want to work on it in an area that's completely and utterly clean of any dirt or dust. I'm just using a clean sheet of cardboard here. This is the grease that we use in a lot of printers and photocopiers. It's a heavily fluorinated grease, and it has really good anti-moisture properties to it. And it never sets and it never dries. It's like once it's made in the chemical factory, it's in the environment forever. It's that type of grease. So just going to get the piston, we're just going to give it a light coating of this grease, and then we'll just push it in to make sure it fits all right in the bore, and then move on. Alright, so there's our new piston. I'll just put a light smear of the grease on it. The worst thing that you can do is get any dirt or any dust, any impurities in there at this point. And we're just going to stick it in the bore and make sure it fits. Spin it around, make sure it doesn't get stuck on anything. That will show you that the bore is out of round if it's getting stuck on anything. And in this case, this feels really good. It's all, there's no getting stuck on it anywhere. And with that grease on there, it really moves it really quite slippery and nicely, and that's what we're aiming for. You also want to push some of the grease into the where the rubber dust cover goes on, and that'll just stop any moisture from getting in underneath and into the piston. And yeah, we'll move on to the next piston and we'll make sure that fits, and go from there. Incidentally, if you need to buy this grease, if you want to buy them, you can buy it at my website, fixitfastelectronics.com. On the left hand side there's a tab there that says printer parts. That grease is in there, you can buy that there. And just when you check out, just put a little note that you're using it not on a printer, that you're using it on brake calipers, just so that we make sure we get you the right type of grease. And the beauty of this grease is it doesn't liquefy until it hits about 400 degrees Celsius. It just stays in this sort of solid, semi-solid state, which makes it ideal to stop calipers from locking up. Yeah, so we'll move on to this next piston, and we're fast running out of light, so I'll get a wriggle on. Alright, so there's our second piston. We'll just get a bit of grease on it there. Incidentally, I forgot to mention, you need to get some on the back of the piston as well. That just stops when the brake fluid absorbs water. This grease forms a little bit of a barrier. You don't want it too thick, you just want it to be like a mega thin coating. Otherwise your brakes might become a little bit spongy if you got too much on there. Stick it in that bore. Yep, that's all good. That's the same. That feels really good. There's no getting stuck at any point. So we'll get those pistons out and we'll move on to putting the rubbers in. Alright, so we've got the new rubbers. It's just a case of fitting them in, making sure you do not fold the O-ring over, and that it's square all the way around. And that it's the correct one and it actually fits. There we go, we got that O-ring in. I'll move on and do the next one. I won't bore with it doing, just make sure that's in. Yep, that's all good. Alright, so I've got both O-rings in there now. I'm just going to go over it with a light smear of the grease. Obviously you're doing this with clean hands and a clean finger. Okay. And then we move on to the most difficult part of the whole job, which is getting the piston in and putting this on at the same time. This is an absolute fun job, not. So ideally what you want to do is you want to undo the bleed valve so that air can get in and out as you're pushing the pistons in, because you'll find that if you're trying to put the pistons in with this, you can just get, it just makes the whole thing difficult. We do have the air breather hole here where we've got the hose, so yeah, actually don't worry about that. Brain fog today. So yeah, so what we're going to do is we just smear the piston with a bit of the grease around, and then we stick the rubber dust cover onto the piston first. Alright, so we've just got our piston. You're going to make sure you've got it on the right way around, so that's the bit there that's going into the lip on the caliper, and we've got a grease smeared all the way around along the tip, and then you just carefully just ease it over. The worst thing you can do at this stage is splitting this rubber. If you split it, go buy another kit and start again. So there we go, we've got that like so. And then what we've got to do is we have to pull it down a bit further off without splitting it. There we go. So we move it all the way down the piston. All the way to the edge before it's about to fall off. You grab the caliper, you stick it into its slot, and once you feel it drop in, there we go, so that's now dropped into the bevels, and then it's just a case of carefully pushing the piston into position. Just got to make sure we haven't dislodged the rubber O-ring. You could feel it. Oh no, it's fallen out up here, so we'll just redo that. Alright, so if your piston's stuck in and you can't pull it out because of all the lubrication that's on your hands and everywhere, just move on and put the second piston in, and then we can just put a little bit of compressed air on here, and that'll help us blow this one out so that we can reset it properly again. We're just rotating this ever so slightly just so that we know that it's gone into the recesses. At this point we may grab a C-clamp and just help gradually just ease that into position. Alright, so I've just got the C-clamp on there, and we're just little by little, bit by bit, just easing it down. Get that dust cap back over it. And then we'll move on to fixing up this area over here. Okay, so I've just put the club hammer in front of this piston here. I'm just going to put a bit of compressed air into the hole in here, and we're going to use the compressed air to push this piston back out so I can reseat it. You don't need too much pressure. Very little pressure is needed to actually move this piston. Okay, so I managed to get this piston out with the air gun blowing in here. We've just managed to get this rubber boot back on properly all the way around. Simply, you get it in and then you give it a slight rotation just to make it sink in. And now I'll just get C-clamp. And we will just ever so gently and carefully push that into the bore. Just got to make sure you go at it little bit by bit, just in case the piston isn't going in square. I won't bore you too much with this, we'll just do it bit by bit. It's probably a good point at this stage to bring that boot over. I'll just confirm that it's seated all the way around. And then we just gradually and carefully bring that piston back to its starting position. I'll just pause and we'll go from there. Alright, that's back home. Everything's back in the way it needs to be. That caliper is rebuilt. We will stick that back on the car. We'll do our usual brake bleed, bleed all the air out of the system up through here. And that is one side of the car done. Calipers usually fail not too, quite close to each other in time. So if you're doing one side, it's advisable to do the other side at the same time as well. I'm just a bit busy at the moment, so we're going to do it one at a time at the moment, and this is the only one that's basically locking up. So yeah, so that's how we rebuild a Ford Territory caliper with all new seals and new pistons. The cheaper method is you can just sand the piston, all the rust off, and put it in and just make sure it's moving around, and just give it a bit more sand if there is a high spot. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for today. I'll put it all back together and we'll bleed it, and hopefully I won't have to touch this for, I don't know, another 5 years after this. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope this helps. Alright, so getting back to the caliper cradle, another reason the calipers lock up is because the calipers bolt onto these slider pins here. So as the pads wear, the caliper is allowed to move by sliding on the slider pins. So if you grab this, so it simply is on like this, and you can grab it and you can pull it out. And you can see these pins of mine have had water inside them, and that there's quite a lot of rust inside there. So what we've got to do is we've got to get in and just clean out the hole that's in there. So we'll get in there with a screwdriver and a rag, and we'll clean all the muck out, and then we'll spray some WD-40, probably a bit of metho in there as well, just to get all the moisture out of there. And there is a special grease for these pins. There's obviously no grease on these pins. It's the first time I've had these brakes apart, and doesn't appear to be any grease on there at all. There's supposed to be what's called black caliper grease. It comes in a tube, and it's heavy on graphite. It's got a lot of graphite or molybdenum in it, and that just stops this pin from freezing in the caliper. So what I found is this upper pin up here, it's completely frozen. I cannot get this pin to move. It's completely rusted in. So it is just jammed up solid, full of rust and goop. And we need to free this up to get this out. So I may need to heat this section up with a blowtorch. Just heat this right up, and then we should be able to just get a spanner on the edge of this and just reef it out. Or maybe we'll get a spanner on the end of this and just turn it. Some of the slider pins, they are actually beveled. They have a beveled edge, so they won't spin like this. They simply go in and they're stationary. So I'm not too sure if this is one of those where it has a beveled edge. I don't think it does. So we've got to free this pin up, because this is the source of all the problems with this particular caliper. Everything else I've done to the caliper has just been extra preventative maintenance. So this is the source of our frozen bad caliper, so we'll get on that and we'll fix that up. Okay, so what I've done is I've just gotten some heavy duty degreaser, and we've just blasted it in here just to free up all the junk that's been built up inside there. That's enabled us to break the pin free, and then straight into the hole we've blasted more with the degreaser, and then we've just started moving this in as we're blasting it with the degreaser, just to get all the junk that's in there out and to free that pin up. So both pins are now free, so that caliper can now slide freely. Now what we've got to do is we've got to get in there and get some good grease in there. So there is tubes of caliper grease that you can get at your local hardware and car parts store. It's called caliper grease. It's heavy on molybdenum and on graphite as well. I don't have a tube of that here, but I've got something even better, which is what I use on my photocopiers. We've got this special grease, which is a different type of grease to the previous grease I showed you. This grease is used in high temperature metal on metal. Alright, so we've got our special fantastic grease. We're just going to smear some of this grease on the shaft. Got it on there, and then we just shove it down this hole. And we just got to lubricate the entire section inside so that this pin freely slides. That's pretty good. At the moment we've got quite a lot of grease in there. We'll do the same on the bottom one, and then we will stick the new rubbers on. So as part of the kit you get new rubbers. So what's happened is the old rubbers have split open and have started letting water in. Stick that over. And then we'll just reassemble the caliper and bleed the brakes, and everything should be pretty good.